Following public outcry, federal government suspends Ruga settlement initiative.
Senate in 2-hour deliberation resolves to investigate case of blindness at the National Eye Center, Kaduna.
OPEC and non-OPEC oil ministers meeting in Vienna commit to more dialogue and oil market stability.
Good Morning Nigeria today focuses on flood alert and ways losses associated with it can be averted as the rains get heavier in the country.
Well, the rains are here again, Kirian, and we all know what that means. The possibility of flooding for many parts of the country, which is particularly worse in floodplain areas. Floods not only damage property and endanger lives, they also produce other secondary effects, such as the outbreak of diseases, in particular cholera.
Well, very true, Kingsley. You know, the irreparable havoc sustained in what has become a perennial natural disaster in Nigerian cities is alarming. And apart from houses that collapse in the floods, school buildings and bridges sometimes collapse as well. Farmlands are submerged for weeks, and sometimes crops are washed away. These are some of the reasons why incessant flooding in Nigeria needs to be tackled as soon as possible.
You know, of course, in the last 3 decades, Kirian, now the impact of flooding has increasingly gone from significant to devastating proportions, resulting, of course, in countless loss of lives and property. Newspaper pages and other media over the past few days have had reports of flooding incidents, one of which was a report of a 9-year-old pupil who was swept away by the flood on his way back from school, and this happened in Abakpa in Enugu State after a heavy downpour. We also had an incident, of course, here in Abuja, that's in the Lokogoma area.
Exactly. Right. There was another report of a 50-year-old woman and her child forced to sleep in a toilet built outside their apartment on higher ground after flood submerged their home in Dubanjo Street in Ikando, that must be Lagos area. In fact, intermittent rainfalls across Lagos have been followed by flash floods in many parts of the state. And of course, the more it rains, the more pain it seems to bring Lagos residents.
Well, the significance of the 2012 flood disaster in Nigeria lies in the fact that the floods of that year were unprecedented. But now, with that experience still fresh in the minds of many, and with the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency has already started, as it were, the annual flood alert series to serve as early warning to persons and communities located near floodplains, as well as other vulnerable areas. Also, relevant authorities have been urged to, at this time, put in place measures to ameliorate the adverse effects of floods that are likely, to cause quite some havoc again in 2019.
Well, you know, what was experienced last year in 2018 was mainly river flooding and pockets of urban flooding, which is usually caused by sudden heavy amount of rainfall for a very short period of time. I have witnessed that type of rainfall in Abuja, and when the ground is unable to take in all of the torrential rain, it begins to find ways to escape. One significant fact is that when flood is looking for a way to move and does not find any, it begins to pull down buildings and anything on its way to find an outlet. And Kingsley, in my village parlance, we say that the flood has no hands and legs. But can, find its way.
Yeah, that's right. But it has a force, and it's not just buildings. We have washout of highways and bridges, in Nigeria, in different parts of the country. And this is why the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, while delivering a flood alert in Abuja for this year, warned that the Federal Capital Territory and all the 36 states of the Federation will experience different levels of flooding for this year, 2019. The agency also has its forecast that some 74 local governments in the country will fall under highly probable, and while others are probable, but that some 421 will be low flood risk. But this flood alerts started in 2013, and that was a year after the devastating incidents of 2012. But the point is that all 36 states of the Federation plus the FCT are on the flood alert with varying degrees of potential devastation.
And while no country is insulated from flood disasters, some countries of the world have not only been able to predict floods before it happens, but also prepare for when it occurs. Now, that the flood outlook has been released, experts say visible efforts should now be made to mitigate the floods and other natural disasters as predicted by the Hydrological Services Agency, considering the country's past experiences of unprecedented natural and human-induced disasters.
There's been a report that the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and other stakeholders have met, having expert and technical workshop on disaster risk management, plus the implication of this year's seasonal rainfall prediction. Now, stakeholders from NIMET and also from the Hydrological Services Agency were among those who took part in that very workshop.
Now, after the meeting, what kind of strategy and action plan should Nigerians expect towards safeguarding and protecting lives and property, infrastructure, and other elements vulnerable in the environment to floods? Is there a comprehensive policy framework for addressing flood challenges and protecting victims in the country? Since flooding has become an annual occurrence in Nigeria, how prepared are relevant agencies to avert loss of lives and property this time around? Now, these are some of the questions we shall seek answers to this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kirian Umayo. It's good to have you join us again on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority for this breakfast show.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague Kirian to also welcome you to the program, being broadcast live as always on the network service of the NTA. In the course of the program, we have our typical complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, and others. But first, let's take the highlights of the morning news, and here is our colleague Lydia. Hi, Lydia. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me for the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has assented to 9 bills passed by the 8th National Assembly. A statement by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters, Senator Itainang, says President Buhari assented to the Police Trust Fund Act, Nigerian National Establishment Act, FCT Management Board, and Health Insurance. Also signed are the Suppression of Piracy and Other Maritime Defense Bill and the Institute of Transport Administration of Nigeria. Others are National Institute of Construction Technology and Management Establishment Bills. The President also gave assent to the National Agricultural Seed Council Bill, Agricultural Credit Guarantee Scheme Fund, and the FCT Primary Healthcare Board. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has assured that the federal government will sustain efforts in building transmission infrastructure and called on the electricity distribution companies, DISCOs, to work harder in injecting more resources and technical expertise to improve supply of electricity across the country. This was when the President received a delegation of Edo State Council of Traditional Rulers and Chiefs led by Oba Eware II.
It is globally accepted that the action which we took against those involved in human trafficking have helped to reduce the illicit trade drastically.
Following public outcry over the introduction of the Ruga settlement project initiated by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, the federal government has suspended the implementation of the Ruga project. The Ruga project is considered to be inconsistent with the federal government and NEC-approved National Livestock Transformation Program. The suspension of the Ruga project was further affirmed by the National Economic Council's Committee on Farmers and Herders Crisis at its meeting on Wednesday.
The President has suspended the implementation of Ruga program initiated and being implemented by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Natural Resources because it is not consistent with the NEC and federal government approved National Livestock Transformation Plan.
The Presidential Election Petitions Court has dismissed the application of the People's Democratic Party and its candidate Atiku Abubakar, asking for an extension of time to join issues with the All Progressives Congress motion filed on 15th May 2019. The five-man panel of justices led by Justice Mohammed Garba gave the verdict this Wednesday in Abuja. Moving on, last week, Nigerians woke up with a shocking story of 10 patients who lost their sight after allegedly being injected with Avastin drug at the National Eye Center, Kaduna. The incident engaged the Senate for almost 2 hours as they resolved to investigate the use of Avastin injection for eye treatment.
NAFDAC to make public the result of their test on the said injection and suspend the use of Avastin injection by hospital in Nigeria for eye treatment.
This same drug was banned in the United States of America.
Avastin drug was used in the United States of America. There were reported victims.
Meanwhile, the senator representing Adamawa North on the platform of the People's Democratic Party, Elisha Ishaku Abu, has apologized to Nigerians, the Senate, the People's Democratic Party, family, friends, as well as Nigerian women for his assault on a lady. Addressing the media at the National Secretariat of the People's Democratic Party in Abuja, Senator Abu says the episode has taught him a great lesson, both as a private citizen and a public officer, particularly as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, upon whom public confidence is bestowed.
I personally apologize to Bibra and her family for my actions. No matter what you did to me, you don't deserve such treatment. I am sorry. I have never been known for violence. Regardless of what transpired prior to my expression of anger, which I'm not ready to discuss.
Correspondent Timothy Yusuf reports that Senator Ishaku Abu assures Nigerians, especially the people of Adamawa North, of his good conduct at all times, pointing out that his family and religious upbringing do not give approval to such conduct and therefore seeks forgiveness before God and all those who feel offended by his action. Plenary turned rowdy at House of Representatives on Wednesday when the Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, read out names of nominees for minority leadership position.
I am aware that yesterday, the Senate, in compliance with parliamentary practice, read out the letter from the APC and the letter from the PDP. And of course, there were dissenting voices. And the Senate President, in his wisdom, advised senators who are aggrieved to go back to their parties, conclude the issues, and as soon as he receives any other correspondence from any of the parties, that he will also read same on the floor.
Participating countries in the Declaration of Cooperation have signed a charter to further strengthen what many describe as a high-level voluntary commitment to stabilize the oil market. The 6th OPEC and non-OPEC ministerial meeting in Vienna, Austria, committed to continue proactive dialogue as they keep a close eye on the market to ensure stability.
Single nation of the 24-nation group has its own independent and extremely valuable opinion, and any decision taken cannot be taken without the acceptance of all countries.
We needed to go outside of OPEC to reach out to other producers to persuade them and convince them with the data to come on board and work with us.
And that's the news highlights for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran after this break. Good morning.
And you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Now we go business. Experts are giving thumbs up for President Muhammadu Buhari as Nigeria prepares to sign the Africa Continent Free Trade Area Agreement, with a call, however, to relevant agencies to brace up in tackling the challenge of dumping and the smuggling in the Nigerian market. Let's now join Joy Uzo for more on that.
Welcome to Business News. We'll start with trending news on the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, in which Nigeria will be signing the agreement in no distant time. And this has generated reactions from stakeholders, with renowned economist Professor Jonathan Aremu hailing the democratic values imbibed by President Muhammadu Buhari in making sure that Nigerians are conversant with the agreement. And based on relevant contributions from established committees, Nigeria has attained the stage of adopting the policy package. However, Professor Aremu called for caution to avoid any form of trade infractions.
I usually question the issue of porosity, because every country has borders. Why is your own porous? That is just exposing the inadequacies of the agents of the government that are not doing their work.
On the positive impact of the AFCFTA to the Nigerian economy, Professor Aremu enumerated some benefits of integration of more businesses, leading to increase in the volume of trade for the nation and a wider room for investors from each member country to enjoy the economic potentials the continent is blessed with. However, to avoid staying out of business, companies, he emphasized, must stay innovative while consistently scaling up their competence bar.
We don't want a situation in which a Chinese company will export certain products to Cameroon. And when you get to Cameroon, they just put made in Cameroon, and then they don't come to Nigeria. Which means that there must be a strong rule of origin. And any country within the African continent that violates the rule of origin will actually be penalized.
The AFCFTA, which was introduced in March 2018, has had 52 out of 55 countries signed the agreement, and 22 have approved it as of February 2019. Nigeria has held back on signing the agreement due to pending decision among all stakeholders, but is now set to key in by next week, when the African Union will be holding its summit in Niger. And moving on now, efforts of the federal government to boost revenue generation through taxation has been commended. Newly elected 14th and 3rd female president of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Ms. Gladys Simplis, made the commendation in an interview with Business News.
They may not be paying as correctly, what people are paying. It's different from what we knew in the past. And that is what we are saying. Let us develop this nation through taxation.
Ms. Simplis also commended the proposed plan by the federal government to introduce value-added tax on online transactions, saying the plan should have been introduced long ago, as the same practice was obtainable in other nations, adding that Nigeria was losing a significant amount of revenue due to that. Now a quick check on how the equities market fared on Wednesday. That's Business News. Many thanks for your time. I'm Joy Uzo.
All right, thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next for us on Good Morning Nigeria, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
And we have about 5 newspapers this morning, Kingsley, and we're also hoping that our newspaper reviewer, Bayataya, will be joining us in due course. But for now, let's take a look at the headlines of the 5 papers we have this morning, beginning with the leadership newspaper. Leadership newspaper below the name plate. Finally, Nigeria agrees to sign AfCFTA. That's African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The full details will be is on page 5 of the leadership newspaper. Now, the main headline this morning on leadership newspaper: Mayor Tiala backs suspension of Ruga settlement policy with 2 riders, 6 return of grazing areas. Cattle colonies only solution to herders-farmers conflict, says NSCDC. Now, more trending stories. More trouble for Senator Abbo as Senate police begin assault probe. With the rider, Senator Whips apologizes. Or that's on page 4. Now, ex-CDS Bade's mother, not politically motivated, says panel, is on page 35. And now the foot of the leadership newspaper. PMB rejects 17 bills, assents 9 others, is on page 36. Federal government releases admission into unity colleges. Reps in rally session over minority leader position, that's on page 6. Court stops APC, others from obstructing Edo assemblies on page 23. Sorry, Kingsley, we were supposed to have taken all that.
You just took all the headlines.
Yes.
What we are seeing here is that all the stories that, all the papers that we have as their lead story the developments on the Ruga settlement initiative. Kicked off, and then, of course, you had a lot of public outcry over that. So let's return to, we're just taking the headlines, and then, of course, we'll get Bayo to kick off with that in terms of discussing the Ruga initiative, which has been suspended. This is how Daily Sun captures it. Daily Sun says, Ruga rested with 2 riders. Federal government suspends herdsmen settlement program amid commendation. And interested states now to present development plan. Details of that story can be found on page 6. Then for the Punch newspaper, the headline is as follows. It's the lead story, by the way, for all the 4 papers that we're taking a look at in terms of their front pages. Reactions as Buhari bows to pressure, suspends Ruga. Details of that story can be found on page 2. But there are 2 riders to that very headline. One says, disarm headsmen, Ohaneze tells federal government, suspension meant to buy time. That's according to Afenifere and Pandev. Details of the story can be found on page 2. So, Bayo, let's, you have another headline there.
The Daily Trust newspaper captures it this way. It says, why Ruga project was suspended, that the presidency. With riders, suspension not solution to the problem, says experts. Of course, I've already told you about that of leadership newspaper, which says Mayor Tiala backs suspension of Ruga settlements policy. And Bayo just joined us. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kyria. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley.
Yeah,
good morning, Nigeria.
So let's kick off with Ruga.
Yes.
Ruga, yes. The suspension was announced by Governor Dave Umahi, who is the chairman of the National Committee for Food Security, Herders-Farmers Conflict. He explained specifically that this is because the Ruga policy was inconsistent with the National Economic Council approved National Livestock Transformation Program. The NLTPP program is for rehabilitation of internally displaced persons resulting from herders-farmers crisis, and also for some states that agreed on their own to volunteer. So you have 7 states that were described as frontline states from the farmer herders crisis, and 6 other states also volunteered, making 13. Interestingly, there's no state from Southeast, no state from Southwest, no state from South-South, with the exception of Edo, that was in part of that program. However, the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, in implementing the policy, tagged it Rural Ruga Settlement Scheme. And this has 12 states that have volunteers. Among the 12 states that volunteer, there's no state from the Southeast, there's no state from the South-South, and there's no state from the Southwest. So there were 12 states here. The problem seems to be a matter of implementing a policy of government. The Federal Ministry of Agriculture, in writing letters, assumed that the frontline states that were in the original program wrote to them. And that was why Benue State, upon receiving a letter, protested that Ruga settlement was being forced down their throat because they were part of the National Livestock Transformation Program, not Ruga settlement. But agric experts says that it is a question of a problem of nomenclature. Rural settlements in the southeast is known as Inaobodo. In the southwest, it is called Gia, and up north, the same thing is called Ruga. But Ruga is popularly known as a Fulani settlement, so people have assumed that by naming the program Ruga settlement, they were imposing Fulani settlements all over the country. And that is just the basis of controversy based on politics, ethnicity, that has undermined a program that is designed to bring peace between farmers and herders.
Has it actually been rested? Because you've just mentioned that about 12 states volunteered, to take on the program. Now, assuming these states go on with that, after the suspension, what happens? Because Nigerians need to understand why the nomenclature you mentioned has now become a determining factor as to what should be the implementation method of an ideology of that magnitude. Because one, to settle herders, farmers clashes, something has to be done.
Yes, the president is reacting to the cross-section of reactions about it. And like it's been said, mutual suspicion between one part of the country, one ethnic group of the country, has highlighted the resentment against the Ruga settlement. This is why, for the peace and for understanding, I think now that if tempers cool down, all those who are raising hue and cry will come back and will begin to think again about the value that is involved in settling the herder farmers clashes. But for now, as heightened suspicion is there, the best solution is to suspend it. But it does not mean that it has been cancelled. It has only been suspended.
Okay, now let's take other headlines. From the Daily Sun, an earpiece beside the nameplate, sex toy shop scandal. That's the kicker. Senator Abo weeps, apologizes. And IGP, the Inspector General of Police, probes policemen's role. Details of that story can be found on page 43. You have the photographs there on the front page. You have a number of photographs, that's about 2 or 3 photographs now in composite form. Reps leadership, uproar as Baja, that's Bajabia Miller, Speaker of the House, names Elumelu minority leader. PDP, APC members battle for maize. And the caption to that photograph, to those photographs, say, members of the House of Reps in a rowdy session over the appointment of minority leader in Abuja. And they also saw them struggling with the sergeant-at-arms over the possession of the maize. Obaseki, that's Edo State Governor, fires 8 commissioners as court bars APC and police, as well as others over assembly crisis. Abba of Benin seeks Buhari's intervention in Obaseki Oshomole rift.
All right, let's return to Daily Trust newspaper. Let's take other headlines. Senator Abo, sorry, as Senate, police investigate assault is on page 3. Reps clash over minority leadership seats is on page 6. Now, Boeing gives 36 billion naira to 737 MAX crash families. All right, now, just below the photo, that's an interesting photo story here on Daily Trust, where a camp where African migrants were quartered in Libya was bombed, and of course many lives were lost. Up to 40 migrants died, and these are all Africans. All right, we have other stories there. Below that, panel parades 15 suspects over ex-CDS baddest murder. It's on page 3. Intervene in Oshomole Obaseki feud. Edo monarch still Buhari. Page 13 is where you get that story. Now, oil marketers get $3.6 billion to import fuel, says NNPC. It's on page 5. Let's bring in Bayo again. Yeah.
Yes, let's start with the bombing of the migrants' camp in Libya. There are concerns that there could be some Nigerians there too. So therefore, the special advisor to the president of diaspora and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the attention should be drawn to it because we may have some Nigerians who are involved in there. Then talking about other running stories, the sex toy shop senator has apologized. However, those who raise the issue on social media are still insisting that apology is not enough, and therefore he should pay compensation to the nursing mother that he assaulted. Already, the police has indicated that they are investigating the issue and also considering the law to take its course. The other running story comes from Kano, how the district head of Daura was rescued. Indications are that after being kidnapped in Katsina, he was taken to about 5 places. First to Yobe State, and next to Jigawa, and then to Abuja, and then again to Kano, within the suburb of Kano. And they said throughout the time he was abducted, there was no communication from the abductors. And therefore, we must praise the police for being able to track them all through and able to arrest them. At the last minute, the leader of the group had negotiated to buy a car. And when he came to pay for the car, the police were able to pick him up. And they took him to the venue where the people are. He announced over public address system for his colleagues to surrender. They refused. And then there was a shootout. Eventually, he even asked them to release his wife and daughter to come out. They refused. And it was after a gone-out shootout that eventually they overpowered them and arrested them. And they found out that that same premises that he rented for and kept the kidnapped Magajin Gari Daura, the same caretaker had rented the place to Boko Haram insurgents before. And that was why there was an immediate reaction from the municipal authority of Kano to demolish that premises.
Okay, yeah, good. All is well that ends well, according to Shakespeare. And the district head of Daura is back safely into the warm embrace of his family. But the story of the of Senator Abu, who went to the adult toy shop, there are many perspectives to this, even from a law enforcement point of view. This is, the video has been played back and back and back, it's been replayed several times, and the more you watch it, the more you get scandalized. Scandalized. This is what happens. We keep talking about the deployment of security personnel for private guard duties.
Politically exposed persons.
Whether politically exposed or business persons or otherwise. Now, this is a police officer who is kitted, or trained in the first instance, kitted and paid for the monthly basis from the public purse. And there he was, another citizen was being assaulted, and he seemed to have been complicit in all of it all. I think that's a very crucial thing that we have to look at. That's one. The other point that, some persons will find it disappointing, and that would include myself. Why would it take the intervention of the Inspector General of Police before, one, the FCT Police Command has a commissioner? That video had been trending. Was it not a wake-up call for him to ask his deep area commander or to ask his DPO, say, look, what happened? You have to wait for the Inspector General of Police. If it were in some remote location of the country, what would have happened? I mean, the senator has no immunity whatsoever. It's not covered by any immunity. So what were the immediate steps taken for law enforcement purposes? He has apologized. He said he was weeping. Let's hope it wasn't crocodile tears he was shedding.
Apology perhaps is not enough. Even the police is questioning his officer that was attached to the senator because he has failed in his duty as a law enforcement agent in the presence of a crime being committed. That's right.
I want to ask one personal question on this matter. If the Nigerian police should, detail officers to be following all these members of National Assembly, we have up to 109 and then another 360. Now, how many are now left to do the duties, the responsibilities, right? Well,
you recall that the former IG indicated that the population of the police as at that time was about 330,000, and about half of them, that's about 150,000, were attached to politically exposed person or one. So you had only about half of that available for policing job for the whole of 190 million Nigerians.
And many would think that you can only be politically exposed the way we mean it when you want to flounce some kind of, maybe the kind of car you brandish, the kind of car you use, you want people to notice that you're around. That is only when you will tell me you are politically exposed.
A police officer doesn't require any other prompting. If in his view, that is to say in his presence, an offense is being committed.
Yes.
And you saw that clearly, assault and battery. I mean, the senator was slapping the woman inside. I mean, whether it was a kid or otherwise, that was an offense.
Yeah.
The other story about Edo State, emphasis seemed to have been placed on the relationship between the incumbent governor and the former governor, but the Oba of Benin Owari II did lay emphasis on one critical fact, the situation of power supply in Edo State. Edo State has been living with epileptic power supply. The situation was compounded just only about last week when a major transformer also went up in blaze. However, Oba Owari was also able to appeal to Mr. President and say that Edo State is the only APC state in the South, and therefore the President should consider and crave their indulgence to provide Edo State with 2 slots.
Okay. Just before you take the editorial, let me just take a few headlines, just very briefly, from the Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate of the Punch newspaper, steel manufacturers threaten to lay off 20,000 workers. That's on page 31. Obasanjo promised Afenifere and AD governors restructuring in second term. That's according to Oshoba. These are stories extracted from his forthcoming book because he's turning 80. And details of that story can be found on page 2. And then right below the photographs of the scenes from the House of Reps yesterday, you have other headlines, including this running story. Military parades 51-year-old and 14 others over their alleged participation in the killing of Alex Bade. Details of that story can be found on pages 4 and 5. Troops killed 20 bandits in Zamfara.
All right, now let's turn to editorial this morning. Dangers of summary dismissal of trained security personnel. And this editorial is, talking about the sophistication and the threatening dimension crimes and criminalities, especially kidnapping, banditry, and robbery, are taking in Nigeria. It's not only worrisome, but unacceptable.
Well, let's start with the story that Kingsley read. The plenary at the House of Representatives yesterday, it became rowdy. The reasons are not far-fetched. The Speaker announced the principal officer for the minority party, and members of the People's Democratic Party protested. Apparently, the minority party is supposed to be a matter of concern for the caucuses of the minority parties, the PDP and others. And they came up with Indudu Elumelu, and the PDP was protesting. And this is why you had that fracas there. And interestingly, the people that have always referred to themselves as the opposition party yesterday were calling themselves the appropriate name, minority parties. And there's not only one in the House, there are more than one minority parties in the House. Now, talking about the editorial, the issue of kidnapping has become a matter of concern. In editorial we reviewed 2 days ago, it was the same kidnapping that we talked about. There has been resentment everywhere. Presently, the nexus of kidnapping in Nigeria now and banditry is in Zamfara State. Then there is some positive development. There has been a representative of the bandits that have come to a peace meeting summoned by the Commissioner of Police with the governor in attendance. And they have reached agreement that the bandits will be prepared to lay down their arms on condition that the vigilance group too will also lay down their arms so that the 2 parties will surrender their arms and there will be peace. That is a very positive initiative that will end kidnapping. However, there is a need to emphasize that following the law that has been passed by the National Assembly and several states too, strict actions must be taken to serve as a deterrent for people who indulge in kidnapping. Several of them have been arrested, but they are still not have been prosecuted.
And again, some dismissed military personnel are also found to be part of, the network of kidnappers. That's what this editorial is talking about. Summary dismissal of trained security personnel, who are also some of them found to be part of the gangs that are operating in different parts of the country.
That is a matter that also needs to be addressed by the security agencies. If you have 7 police officers who are experts in arms handling and soldiers who have been dismissed for one reason or the other, the officers, the authorities in the armed forces and the police must have a track of those persons so that they don't get themselves involved in this kind of thing. So they should have a means of tracking them down.
It's not, but Bayo, this is an issue we have discussed on this program in the past. It's tracking, in my opinion, would not be sufficient. And the authorities also ought to resist the knee-jerk reaction of summary dismissal. Because these are persons who have been trained in weapons handling and they've been exposed to this. A number of instances in whether robbery or kidnapping, you have found former service personnel who have been involved. The offer robbery, of course, readily comes to mind as one of those letters. There should be or could be other forms of sanction. Demotion is one of it. Are you with me? Demotion is one of it. And then assignment to other duties so that while you are still under the control and authority of that service to which you belong, chances are that you're unlikely to come in. But once you become a free agent, there's no food on the table.
Of course, yes. So all right, it's on this note that we conclude this newspaper review segment for today. Thank you, Bayo Atoyebi, for being here this morning for that purpose. Well, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll, of course, move into the nitty-gritty of our show this morning. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back. And I still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, Nigerian Television Authority. To set the tone for our conversation this morning on the flooding situation potentially for 2019, let's take this background out from our correspondent, Abdul Malik Adio.
Flooding is a recurring problem in many parts of the world. In Nigeria, experts say the story is the same, with statistics of flood fatalities of over 363 people and displacing 2.1 million more in 2012. Its attendant consequences on physical damage and economic halt in some towns and cities during the heavy downpour are even worse. With the gravity of the adverse effect on lives and property, the Nigerian Hydrological Service Agency presented its 2019 annual flood outlook in Abuja. The seventh in its series, with the theme, The Role of Efficient Hydrological Service in National Development. The Director General of the National Hydrological Service Agency, Clement Eze, says, no fewer than 74 local government areas in 30 states in Nigeria would experience severe flooding in June, July, August, and September, while 279 local government areas would experience minimal flooding across the country in the period. Clement noted that causative factors such as climate change, man-made factors have been well articulated, and no person should build structures within the floodplains, and people should clean their drainages, with detailed studies on hydrogeological behavior of areas like Anambra, Bayelsa, Imo, Kogi, and Rivers State. Experts say the annual flood outlook serves as an early warning to people and communities located in and near floodplains and other vulnerable areas to ameliorate the adverse effect of flood to lives and property. Though the federal government is taking fundamental initiatives to manage river flows within the country through the construction of dams, reservoirs, artificial lakes, barriers, and other structural measures, there is need for other non-structural measures such as floodplain mapping and sensitization.
Partnership with the riparian countries of the rivers Niger and Benue, as well as the Lake Chad Basin Commission, to control the releases from dams in such a way not to cause havoc in Nigeria.
Experts are stressing the need for the establishment of more hydrological monitoring stations, timely forecast, and flood alarm system at high-risk areas to prepare adequately against any eventualities.
Joining us to discuss flood and ways Nigeria could be able to avert losses is Engineer Clementins. Engineer Clementins is the Director General of the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency. So thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And also with us here in Abuja is Professor Sani Abubakar Mashi. Director General of NIMET, that's the Nigerian Meteorological Agency. He is also Nigeria's permanent representative at the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. So you're welcome to the program.
Nice to meet you.
All right, from our Kaduna Network Center, we have two guests who will be joining us in this conversation. First, let's welcome one of our regulars, is Professor Emmanuel Adanu. Professor Emmanuel Adanu is the Executive Director, National Water Resources Institute, also based in Kaduna. Professor Adanu, pleasure to have you again. It's rainy season, so good to have you back on Good Morning Nigeria. Yahya Ibrahim is an Associate Professor of Environmental Health and Safety Management, and also Director, Center for Energy and Environmental Strategy Research at Kaduna State University. So, Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, pleasure to have you with us on the program. By the way, you can see the split screen there from our Kaduna Network Center. The gentleman in Dhaka Kaftan is Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, and Dr. Emmanuel, Professor Emmanuel Adanu is to his right, that's to say, to the left of us here. So, yes. Professor Emmanuel Adanu, pleasure to have you gentlemen once again on Good Morning Nigeria. Let's begin with, before the floods, of course, you have to have, you know, a forecast or prediction of what the weather outlook will be like by a period of time.
And this forecast has taken place, both from NIMET and, of course, the Hydrological Agency of Nigeria. Gentlemen, the worst fluvial flood in Nigeria was that of 2006, which hit Kaduna so badly, where many hundreds of thousands of human lives and property were affected. And then in 2012, we had what could be described as the most devastating flood in recent times in Nigeria, where almost all the states, you know, got affected at different levels. And now let's come down to 2019, where of course predictions have been made. And I would like to ask the Director General of the Hydrological Agency of Nigeria to, you know, give us account of what has happened so far in terms of flooding in 2019. Are you in any way alarmed about the amount of flooding so far?
Okay, thank you so much. I think the flooding is progressing in accordance with our prediction. I won't say I'm alarmed, or our agency can say we are alarmed, because we've done necessary preparations. We have already gone through the mills to come up with what we are seeing right away. So to us as an agency, or me as an individual, I'm not being taken by surprise that what is occurring is taking place in Nigeria already. So it's progressing in accordance with our prediction, unfortunately anyway. Because if measures were taken by relevant agencies and governments, some of them couldn't have happened.
Okay, and you know, Nze, that's flooding. Professor Mashi of NIMET, we are experiencing some rainfall already, but when would be the heaviest period for rainfall? And what is likely to be the distribution pattern around the country? Have we seen the heaviest of rainfall, so we should still look out for more?
Thank you very much. When we released our prediction on the 24th of January 2019, what we predicted, we said generally over the country there will be late onset of rain. And late onset of rain meaning that the effective rain commencement will be delayed. And we also predicted that it will also finish early. The implication of this, it means very high amount of rain is going to be received over a shorter period of time. It will start late and end early. Usually, peak periods when we normally receive rain is usually within the month of August. So the implication of this, it means what we are seeing now is just the beginning. We have not yet reached the optimum period when we are going to have peak amount of rain within the country. This is what the predictions that we released in 2019 is showing. And you can see it has actually started. That explains the point why we particularly advise farmers against early commencement of planting. Particularly in northern part of the country, we say nobody should plant earlier than July. But some as early as May, they started planting against our advice. And they have already been recording crop failures already.
Well, is this a prediction reminiscent of that of 2012? Because the flooding started. I was lucky. I wasn't a victim, but I saw it starting. Yes. You know, because we applied local jar. Right, and then we saw about 2 or 3 inches, covering the highway, right, and then that was in August. And by the time we got to Abuja, just 3 or 4 days after that, we now had that Lokoja was submerged. So this prediction, is it a tandem, with that of 2012? Because you are saying that we've not seen the heavy part of the rainy season yet.
Yes, exactly. You see what has happened over the last 15 to 20 years. The climate of the country, like that of several other countries, has been significantly modified by the changing trends we have now witnessing over the world. So it's like the trend has consistently been similar over the last 10 to 15 years within the country. Rains have not been starting early, and they are stopping early. So the implication of this, it means the amount of rain we do receive, because over a long period of time, we have an average amount of rain that we are supposed to receive, will always be received within a short period of time. And that implication of this, it means high amount of water will now be available on the surface within a shorter period of time. And because the surface cannot effectively absorb it, we don't have enough structures to convey the excess amount of water we have on the surface. Definitely we are going to have flooding. There are no two ways about it.
Do you have a sense of what the spatial distribution of rainfall would be like during this short period that we're going to have the heaviest of the rainfall?
Yes, always whenever we release the prediction, always we try to determine how much is expected within the early part, how much is expected within the middle part, and how much is expected within the late part of the rainy season. So we always have that prediction. It's always known.
Okay. We'll go to Kaduna, but I want Clement to respond to some of the comments that he has made. Or rather, may I just ask if there is an alignment, between the prediction of NIMED and that of yours? If there is any, linkage, how useful is that, in terms of mitigating the flood?
When Prof was speaking, I was nodding my head because what he mentioned is in tandem with what informed our prediction. Actually, the amount of precipitation or rainfall as predicted by NIMED is part of our input data in our prediction. So when he said about having late onset and early cessation, to us it means, just as he mentioned it, we are going to have high amount of rainfall within a short period of time. And like he mentioned too, the issue of conveyance structure, impermeable environment where we live in so many places, now translates to flooding. We've been monitoring it. It has been working in the same pattern. So long as there is a late onset, early cessation, means high amount of rainfall or water is available, surface water, a shorter period of time, if not properly managed, which translates into flooding, especially the catastrophe that follows it.
All right, Engineer Jose, thank you very much. Let's return to our Kaduna Network Center where we are introduced 2 guests. Professor Emmanuel Adano, of course, you've listened to 2 guests here in the studios, and you also do your own monitoring. This year, we haven't seen a repeat of what happened, was it last year or 2 years ago in Katsina, which got pounded by some heavy rainfall. But otherwise, nationwide, what is your observation so far?
Thank you very much. Just as the professor said, and my brother Nze, we don't have anything special about the prediction so far. Katsina last year was one exceptional case because in the prediction of Katsina last year, or general flood outlook last year, Katsina was not one of the states named to be flooded. But incidentally, it was one of the first to be flooded. So sometimes these predictions don't come the way we expect them to come. But on the whole, we still have a long time to go. We're just getting into the process of experiencing the flood. Now, if I may just ask a few questions. Over the years, we've been having this ritual, coming here to talk during flood and all this. We should also be taking stock of our response to these floods. What is it that we cannot do to at least reduce the effect of this flood on the country generally? We are very much aware that between 1995 and 2015, we have lost about 10 billion cubic meters of underground water. Now we have increased our surface water tremendously as well. At the same time, what is responsible for this? That means that the ground is no more taking water, probably are extracting too much, and if the condition is suitable, the ground should also take the surface water to replenish, but it's not happening. So our surface water is increasing, and groundwater is depleting, no recharge appreciably. So what is the problem? I think we need to look at the prediction as well as the outlook. We did, just 2 Sundays ago, we were on Jabi Lake doing a bathymetric study to see the amount of sedimentation in Jabi Lake. I was there for 2 days with the boat doing all these things. We realized that Jabi Lake has been sedimented. You drive over, you think it's a very beautiful lake. It's so constipated. Sometimes you see water level of about half a meter. If you put a stick through, you after half a meter, you touch the ground. But if you keep dipping the stick, you go down to about 2.5 meters of sediments in the lake. The same thing is happening all over the country. All over the country. Now, urbanization is a very serious. When you urbanize an environment or pave the ground, you have deprived that environment of infiltration. That water turns to runoff. These things will keep happening. But we have a record of the attitude of most of our floods, water movement, and if you notice, all the predictions will follow a certain level of pattern. But discretely, you start seeing certain areas come into play because probably the ground in these areas are no more taking water, or the land practice, agricultural practices are hindering infiltration or even aggravating inflow of surface flow, depriving the rivers of containment. You see? So we have all these things. We need to take a holistic look at this and see how we can find a solution. Flooding will happen throughout the lifetime of human beings, but there are certain areas that we can protect, and I think we need to do this effectively, starting from now.
All right. Thank you, Professor Adanu. Now, in line with the holistic view that you mentioned, which of course Nigeria should address its mind to, I'd like to bring in Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, who is an associate professor of environmental health and safety management. Dr. Ibrahim, is it possible for all the relevant agencies to align the focus of flood risk reduction in the country with the objective of making pivotal recommendations that could lead to a mitigating measure that will enable Nigeria safeguard lives and property during a rainy season?
Well, thank you and good morning. It's actually very, very fundamental for us to have an integrated policy, integrated principles and a movement towards mitigating the catastrophe that we're witnessing as a result of the quantum of floods we're witnessing all over the country. The first thing is we need to holistically look at our attitude, which we refer to in environmental studies as anthropogenic activities of human. Our culture, our genetic, biological factors that influence us into interfering with the ecosystem is fundamentally one very principal thing that we need to really work on. One, infiltration or lack of carrying capacity and ability of the surface water to be absorbed by the underground water, or the water table is going down, is actually a systemic problem that we need to look at from the point of view of our culture. We keep deforesting everywhere. And we know the capacity of soil to be able to absorb whatever it is that is on the surface is the availability of the trees, shrubs, grasses, and all over, because they are a contributing factor. Just look at most of the rivers, the basins that we have, and the artificial dams that we created, the dikes all over. You can see that on the other side, there's nothing like a tree or any plantation that can be able to assist in reducing the amount of sediment that goes into the river. And by the time the sediment flow freely and move into the nearby river, the tendency will be that there will be high sedimentation. We refuse to understand. We refuse to promote. We refuse to join our hands together. All the agencies refuse to agree to work together to see that we develop a traditional sedimentation removal or desilting of the rivers and the nearby basins that we have, so that we can be able not only to use mechanical, even the tradition. We refuse to accept. We refuse to do that. If you take, for instance, the Jigawa State crisis in those days, whenever the river went to flood, even though it's a gated dam, sometimes you release and it becomes an issue. Sometimes, if you look at Kangimi, when you release, it also becomes an issue. Why is it? Because there is high sedimentation in the river, so therefore the quantum of water going into the river cannot be, contained by the river. Therefore, we are having issue. Basically, the integrated policy, the integrated effort that the NIMEC and all the other agencies are supposed to do, the government, the state, and the local government, and even the local stakeholders, that's the communities, they need to do is to understand that nobody is coming to desilt your drainage. First, that's the beginning of the problem. They think in your own house you have a drain in front of your own house, and the government is to desilt it for you. That is one very fundamental culture that we need to change. The second one is that I am independent. I'm an agency. I have my budget. I have my everything and my right. So I have an independent reporter that I'm presenting to Nigerians. Therefore, not even withstanding, I will just present it, and I cannot integrate with the other one to see what holistic policy are we coming up, so that we reduce from 1995, as said by Professor Adanu, and then as also discussed by Professor Mashi, and as agreed by my brother, the senior colleague there, that we actually are having continuously an increase in the amount of flood that we witness in Nigeria. That is an aberration. Why should we be having a prediction continuously, and we're having an increase continuously without having a mitigation measure? That means that quite a number of citizens are in difficulties. Quite a number of citizens are having health problems. Quite a number of citizens are not safe. Quite a number of rivers are dying, and that means that a number of people are also dying in Nigeria. So my own position here is that all the institutions, all the agencies, all the stakeholders, be it state or local government, and any other person must integrate. After the prediction, what next? What next is we should integrate ourselves. We should integrate our finances and funds and come up to see, now we are promoting, tree planting on the side of the rivers, and we are engaging the youth. By that, you are also employing the youth to have employment. We are not only planting trees, but we are planting trees that will have economic value. So which means that you are also increasing the value of the trees of the society and the environment you are improving. If we did not do that, every day we spend money, every day we budget for something, and every day we have the same prediction. That is an aberration, and we don't need to do that. That means that we're not using our knowledge, we're not using our intelligence and the capacity that we have in all the agencies. So we need to think forward and begin to move forward too.
All right, Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, thank you very much there for the points that you have raised with regard to environmental management on the heels of the flooding that we expect in 2019. Back again to our guests in the studios, Engineer Clement Nze. What has been the institutional response to the flood alert issued by your agency? In other words, how also integrative have other agencies or institutions been with you on account of the warnings that you have issued?
Thank you so much for the question. I think about 2 weeks ago, I was on NTA Fact File. The agencies of government that are responsible for prediction, alerting the nation, they have been collaborating. We work in tandem with NIMET. And we often always relay our findings, the prediction, to the disaster agency, that is the NEMA. But when it comes to the relevant arms of government or the states that are to take action or take steps to mitigate, the flooding, issue, I don't think there's anything actually happening there. NISA had been going around the country. We've been in Ekiti. From there, we moved to Port Harcourt. In each of the places, we met with the relevant stakeholders, state governments. We were in Makurdi on Tuesday this week to speak with them, to the government. But what is lacking is proactive measures being taken by governments, state governments or stakeholders, to mitigate the negative impact of flood, like Professor Danu mentioned. As long as human beings are here on earth, as long as this earth remains, flooding will continue to occur. Like somebody, I was asked by, Kirian Umayo the other time, why is there always flooding? I said that so long as there's rainfall, we'll be having flooding in any part of the world. But what can be mitigated or can be, reduce the impact is the disaster that, that goes along with the flooding. So when it comes to carrying out fiscal measures to reduce the negative impact of flooding, there has not been much cohesion, to the best of my knowledge. Now, in my agency, we collaborate with Shell Petroleum, Shell, SBDC. After the 2012 flood incident, they were highly negatively impacted in the operational basis. They lost a lot of wells. And then the communities where they operate, it was as if they are not responsible enough to do something for them. So since then, they have been working in tandem with our agency to be able to get detailed information with regards to flood propagation along the rivers Niger and Benue and all the tributaries to help them take measures ahead of time within their communities and in their operational bases, their facilities. So it is still lacking, like Dr. Yahya mentioned. After the prediction, what does relevant agencies of government or state government to do with it so that we avoid this ritual of every year we come out to predict, we go on to sensitize the people, and at the end of the day, nothing actually happens positively to reduce the negative impact.
I just wondering, just a follow-up to that, and I'm sure Professor Martin might also wish to respond. Okay, NIMET makes its weather prediction for the year, and hydrological services, you talk about the flood alert. From your conception, or the conception of the Water Council, who is supposed to follow up, who is supposed to come down to take the information from you, or how do you cascade it to, let's say, the subnationals? Is it the Ministry of Environment at the state level, or is it the Ministry of Water Resources at the state level, or is it the Governor's Office? Why do they appear to be somewhat lethargic in following up to these matters that ordinarily would have an impact on them?
Well, I think, to the best of my knowledge, the floods occur in the states. This, leaves a lot of burden on the state governments. Because it was to be getting difficult for us to get at the governors. We've now gone through the Nigerian Governors Forum. They have a secretariat, they have a DG. We invited them because he said it is easier to reach the governors through their secretariat here in Abuja, Nigerian Governors Forum, that has a well-established office. And we are told that whatever information we pass through them, we get to these governors easily. So we involve them, during our, outlook prediction, presentation, right, the public presentation. So the main action is with the state governors. They know their locations, where the things happen, and that's why we go from place to place, and we can't do more than that. To tell you, like we were in Benue on Tuesday this week, we were in Port Harcourt Wednesday last week, invited the relevant agencies and the stakeholders in those environments within the catchment to inform them. So much has to be done by the state governments by way of taking action, physical action to ameliorate the impact of flooding.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring in Professor Mashi to, to respond.
See, part of the problem of the country is the disaster management structure, the approach we are following towards disaster management. There is actually a missing link. We have a national nodal agency under the federal government that is saddled with the responsibility of planning, preparing, monitoring, and ensuring that disaster is effectively managed within the country, which is National Emergency Management Agency. And the idea, according to the NEMA Act, state governments are supposed to have their own state emergency management agencies. At local government level, there is supposed to be state emergency management, local emergency management committees. So what happened here now is, while federal government has been doing a lot to ensure that NEMA is properly organized, NEMA is properly funded, and then NEMA is properly empowered to discharge its mandate. When you go to the state and to the local government, you don't find complementary arrangement. So you discover that we will do our best, make our predictions, our sister agency will come up with a flood outlook, a lot will be given early enough, and therefore expecting that state and local government are supposed to take certain preemptive measures. These measures will not be taken. When floods occur, the same local government and state government will come cap in hand to NEMA seeking for support. This is the problem of the country. So it's like if the state government and the local government cannot be up and doing, they have to be well organized. They have to commit resources. They have to mobilize a lot. So that once if predictions are made, state and local government must ensure, for instance, the flood conveyance structures, are they in order? If they are not there, provide them. You will discover that nothing will happen. It's only when the floods occur that noise will start, they will start making noise. And in some cases, they will even start looking on to NEMA to give them support. So this is the problem we are having.
Okay, well, Professor Marsh is still with you, and in terms of collaboration and cascading down information. NIMET, you make your prediction. Earlier in the program, you did say that, look, you had warned that there will be late onset of rain and early cessation, and that don't start planting until right about June or July. But according to you, in some places, people already started planting by May. What is the linkage between NIMET and agriculture or water resources, again, at the subnational level? Are they enthusiastic about collecting your information, collecting your data, and ensuring that they now use that to formulate their agric extension services or water management policies at the state level or at the local level?
Honestly, Nigerians are always enthusiastic about the product and services we offer. We offer services in agriculture, we call agrometeorology, in water, hydrometeorology. We offer services, advisory services, alert information we release them. Nigerians are always enthusiastic. Whenever we are on the air or we release our program, you can see the level of enthusiasm on the side of the Nigerians. But the issue is, for them to be able to take the necessary measures that are supposed to be taken, they need to be motivated. Certain conditions are supposed to be made available. Who is supposed to make them available? The state and the local government in particular, because they are the ones that are living with the people. So when, for instance, we make prediction and we say the rainy season is going to be short, the implication of this, it means you should not plant the type of seed you are used to planting. You should go and look for a seed that will mature, germinate, and mature in a short period of time. This seed, you cannot have access to it. There are companies that are producing and multiplying these seeds. So therefore, motivation is needed. Someone is supposed to use money, go and buy the seeds and subsidize them so that the farmers can buy. When you don't have that, how can you plan? How can you prepare? My colleague, Engineer Enze, talked about doing something about flood conveyance structures. You don't expect ordinary individuals now to go and use their money and start constructing or modifying the structure. Someone is supposed to be doing that. The only thing they can do is to complement what the government is doing. So this is the kind of link that is missing. Somebody should provide the leads. State and local government need to be open to it.
Kieran, from what Professor Mashi and indeed all the guests both in Kaduna and Abuja studios are saying is, look, if you are a state government, you don't need to set up your own NIMET. In other words, NIMET is already there at the national level, funded and operated as a federal agency. Utilize the information that comes from it to organize your own activities and arrangements. The same thing with the hydrological agency that we have. They give out the information and then use that information to plan your own lives.
The key issue here is the will of the state governments to key into some of the predictions, that are coming from NIMET and, of course, the hydrological agency, of Nigeria. It behoves on them, of course, as leaders in their various states to key into all of this, because one, when the flood strikes, the citizens of the states are affected. In fact, they're affected to a level where the state could be put into a quagmire, economically, socially, and otherwise. Now, let's return to Kaduna once again, to Professor Adanu. If I understand Engineer Nze and Professor Mashi well, in terms of the issue of a synergy, it does seem that what is lacking is the inability of the relevant agencies to come together and decide on steps or measures that could be taken to really mitigate flood and the other issues that, other matters that could arise from flooding. Now, Professor Adanu, you were director of dams at the Ministry of Water Resources, and you are well in tune with the position or the role of dams when it comes to general water control, be it flood or other water management issues. Now, give us a clue as to the kind of dams in Nigeria and the role they could play in either mitigating flood, because of course we know that dams are also contribute also to flooding, right? And also can also control flood. So let us know what could be possible in Nigeria, given the dams that we have and the capacity of such dams, and what they can do with respect to mitigating flood in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much. One is to answer the question of collaboration and coherent interaction between agencies. NIMET and NISA are doing this very well. Each time there's a prediction from NIMET, NISA will go out and give us a flood outlook. And that is very good. Now, when it comes down to implementation of some of these things, we will have a situation of vacillation, which is foot dragging, and then patience, which is waiting without complaining. If they come to a stage that nobody knows what to do, there's vacillation, there's patience, and that is always a problem. Now, in terms of dams that can, well, before you construct a dam, there must be a purpose for it. Now that flooding is going to be a major thing in Nigeria, and it will continue to be a major thing, we can find dams that are specifically designed for flood control. I know one of them resulted from the environmental impact assessment of a possible damage to a lake, a volcanic lake in Cameroon. That is one that is responsible for control of flooding. The Kashimbila Dam is being completed and is operational now. That can only reduce or modify 27% of the inflow into Benue from River Kasinala. But there are other streams and rivers there that contribute heavily into these rivers. Now, if you look at the hydrological areas in Nigeria, there are 8 of them. Each of them has an approximately huge volume of water in the regions of between 12 and 30 billion cubic meters of water. And these are derived from rivers that are there in the basins. Now, the soil in these basins are different. Now, if you think a dam is necessary for control of flooding in such environments, we can isolate them. We have candidate dams, about 200 or 280 something sites that one can easily identify for flood control and for other general use. But if you make a presentation, you should not forget that dams are very expensive to construct. So with competing financial demands of other sectors, it becomes very difficult for us to control major dams. But we can isolate certain dams that can control a substantial amount of flood in the country. We have candidates too. Then we should look at our hydrological areas and see our watersheds. There are about 5 or 6 major watersheds that produce big rivers that can be dammed and also reduce the inflow. But it is huge. Candidate dams are there. I don't need to mention them. Some have been very politically intriguing, and nobody wants to talk about them. But in effect, these are the ones that can help us moderate our dams. The flood in Nigeria. As I say, the flooding will keep coming. But even the developed nations that are highly technical in terms of engineering capacities, they still have floods. But if you look at their floods, some excessive natural event will trigger it. And that is the point we want to bring Nigeria to. Not these minor things that we can do away with, causing flood within the country. The ones that 2012 was beyond our scope. It was not a question of we're not managing our gutters well and all this. This flood that came and even took over parts of the city, including our gutters and everything. So I think we can get these candidate sites and see whether we can progressively construct dams and make sure that they are majorly for flood protection.
Okay, Professor Adano, thank you very much. But still with you, gentlemen, in Kaduna Network Center, I would like Dr. Yahya Ibrahim to respond to the issue of utilizing information coming from the relevant agencies, NIMET and the Hydrological Services Agency and others. You talk about using it for cultural purposes. Aviation, of course, uses it much more regularly, but right there on the ground, and in terms also of our environmental management practices, is there a sense in which there is probably a resignation to the fact that, look, rainfall is an act of God. Flooding is also an act of God. It comes seasonally when, if some houses are submerged or swept away, people will typical of us will put our hands on our heads and say, where's government to, where's government to? Whereas the appropriate measures have not been taken. What is wrong philosophically with our environmental management with regard to mitigating the impact of floods?
Well, thank you very much. I would like to I'm not too good a meteorologist, but I think fundamentally we are very much aware that there's a natural cycle that whenever there is issue with the Indian Ocean, naturally it affects whatever we have here. And that natural cycle is that whenever there is a problem of flood in India, definitely we are going to witness the opposite, which means that we're going to have less rain. I don't know whether we're taking that into cognizance whenever we are planning our early warning system or we are trying to develop our alert. These are very fundamental. First thing we need to understand, because sometimes when we now make predictions, the predictions are always plus minus. So those minuses are those areas that we did not touch. What natural factors also contribute to this flood that we are seeing? Is it within our border or beyond our border? We need to look at that very critically. There's direct relationship, natural relationship between the Indian Ocean and the Nigerian Ocean here down. So we need to understand that first when we're making our prediction. Does that mean that the Indians are also having a prediction that we can make comparison, that they're anticipating to have a flood? Then definitely here we have to think of where can we get what so that we can be able to have rain harvest, which we don't do. Naturally, we don't harvest the rain. So one fundamental thing in trying to mitigate is to only try as much as possible. I enjoy when I'm moving down to Benue, Kogi, when I see people trying to harvest rain for domestic consumption. Down here in the north, we don't even do that. That is just small. If they have this culture, why don't we promote this culture and begin to think that this culture of rain harvest could be also a factor? The rainy season, dry season, we don't have anything. Why don't we think of smaller areas where we can just direct the rain and the surface water in the nearby villages? I don't know. I'm not too much an engineer of dams. At least Professor Adano is here. But I know the volume, the size, the width, and the depth also determine what water goes to where. And by the time you have high sediment into that area, there's every tendency that the water will overflow. And if that is simple analogy of what it is, then why don't we now try to see that those traditional water harvest is a solution, apart from looking outward from the international borders. Then look inward. What can we do? Can we now harvest rain? How can we harvest rain? People are hearing for the first time, some of them, when you say you harvest rain. How do you harvest rain? These are some of the things that people need to do. All we're talking about, we're having 4 factors to consider whenever we're talking about flood. We're talking about knowledge of the risk, which the early warning is telling us. The knowledge of the risk is fundamentally is what we're discussing here. The second one is to have, the communication capability, which is the question that you asked me. Having had all the news, having, obtained all the data, so what next? Who is going to hear what, and how is he going to respond to that thing that you told him? First, you have said that they are working, Professor Mashi just said that they are working seriously with the agricultural outfits in Nigeria, and they're taking it in. They're taking it in, but it is not fundamentally actually giving them the right instrument to work with it. Because from their school gate, they don't even have it as a curriculum. When I did my master's in Mina, we have meteorology. We actually take meteorology from year 1 to the final year, and it is very fundamental. That's why I know that if you are calculating, an embankment, this is what you do. If you are calculating a drainage, for what purpose? You look at the volume, you look at the size, you look at the anticipated rainfall. So quite a number of agri guys that are supposed to, take the information down don't even have the right information. They don't even understand the information. They don't know how to interpret the data given, and they need to be trained. So my suggestion first is, having done that, the NIMET and the Hydrological Institute need to go down, not only to visit states, but also to visit all the agricultural outfit where those people that go down to the villages, that is the, the agric extension officers, need to be informed. They need to understand. They need to interpret in their own language so that the local people can be able to understand. The second one is response, which is the third one. The response knowledge, the response capability, the preparedness. Are they ready? Do they have the information how to prepare against disaster or flood or anything like that? Most local people don't, despite the fact that we're having the local communities or the local government. I participated almost 3 times at the yearly workshop of NEMA, and I knew quite well that the only people that are trained actually are going out, just like Professor Mashi rightly said. They are going out, but the local government will need to come up. NIMET and NEHSA need to come up with a very strong memo to the federal government, and it must be discussed at the federal, federal council, so that it can be that anybody that did not take or take with levity the decision or the early warning given by these institutions, be it local government or anything, is an institution, is actually risking the life of the citizen and must not be given away, because the Constitution is very fundamental that you have to protect life and properties. If we do not take these stringent measures, people will take everything for granted. The local government will take it for granted. Of course, in Kaduna State, I was lucky. I stayed there for 2 years as Director of Public Health and Laboratory Services in Kepa. And my first assignment is to go around Kaduna River. I have seen what I saw. Some people, because they just love to have land, they have diverted even the river. They have rechanneled the river, which means that they are rechanneling the river to create flood. Mostly, Professor Adani will bear me witness. I believe Professor Mashi and even Nisa can be able to let you know, sir. We worked together with him, and we went to the place, and we saw how they rechanneled the river. And that is what is causing flooding in Angwandosa every year. Until today, nothing has been done. And go to the side of the river, nobody leave a space of 5 meters. Quite a number of, there's no 5 meter space between the houses and the river. And I agree with Professor Adanu again, urban development without urban planning, without strictly complying to the urban plan or urban development policies, and they also immaturity and corruption associated with the people that are supposed to manage. Whenever I'm going out, I take the inland water, I take the Kasubda, I take from Environmental Protection Agency, I take Federal Ministry of Environment alone, and we go around to collect our data. We go around to give warning, but when you give the warning, it ends there, because you did not have the apparatus of who is and how is he going to be. If you take, I took more than 50 people to court on this issue, but no judgment. I couldn't get any judgment that can penalize the person. So these are some of the issues. Just the environmental laws are very, very loose. So for you to be able to take somebody, minimum is 30 meter or 40 meter away from a main river, but are we really taking that into cognizance? That you should not go and build your own house in the plot plan. Do we really adhere to that? These are some of the challenges. Is it that we don't have the information, or is it that we feel we are having big man there that can always talk whenever we offend or we violated the law? These are fundamentally things that we need to sit down. We need to sit down at a stakeholders workshop. We need to sit down at a lower stakeholders workshop and be able to now cascade this thing into the mind of people and understand that if you kill one, you are responsible. And you go back to, maybe if I go moral, you go back to your God and you have to explain that you are the cause of this. This is the campaign I do go to tell people. If you block your drainage, just common drainage, it is very simple. It may be beyond that, but that is the beginning. So I believe people need to be informed. We need to talk about the knowledge of the risk. We need to talk about the issue of assessing the risks and then be able to now cascade it down for people to understand in their own language and their own culture. We need to also develop a policy, a framework that can be able to make us, do away with all those factors, be it sediment, be it the silting, be it whatsoever, that will be actually the additive that causes the flood. And we need to also develop a disaster preparation, measures that are local, that are culture driven, so that people can be able to understand. Unless we come down here, we come down to this level, hardly we will continue to have the forecast, and we're likely, I'm not an angel of doom, but we'll continue to have it, because doing the same thing, the same time, giving solution to the same problem and still having the problem means that you are not giving any solution.
Dr. Oyeha Ibrahim, thank you very much for that implicit analysis. You may not be an angel of doom, but you seem to be saying the truth to us. Well, honestly, Kingsley, at the local level, where I come from, there is this a routine of checking flood in our village. We had the cultural method. Till date, we still do that. Otherwise, the community will be submerged by flood. So he was talking about, the necessary cultural practices that we should do, at least even to adhere to the law of the land. All right, now the issues...
Rain harvesting.
Yeah,
so as you harvest your corn, you also harvest rain.
Exactly, and you see the issues are multi-dimensional. Now, we have established here that flood is an inevitability factor as far as life is concerned. And Professor Danu also noted that if we cannot manage the category of flood that we find in Nigeria, then we cannot even think of managing the kind of floods that we see elsewhere across the globe. They are so huge that even with all their technical know-how, they still find it difficult to handle. But if such happens here, it's going to be a very huge problem. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we are discussing flood disasters. And at this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll be bringing in the concluding aspect of our conversation on the subject matter. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria for the network service of the NTA. Just before we went on the short break, my colleague Kirian did indicate that we'll be getting the closing thoughts of our guests, but we also have a number of reactions that have come in through the tweets, and our handle is still there on the screen at NTA GMN. Kirian, let's take some of the tweets now, and then we'll return to the guests. Dilly Jack Solomon, while we expect governments at all levels to provide mitigating strategies against flooding, individuals must also avoid building on floodplains, and they should also construct barriers to stop flood waters from entering their homes and seal walls and basements with waterproofing compounds to avoid seepage.
All right, from Mike Anyako, the relevant government agencies must make hay when the sun is shining. They must act decisively now to prevent any future calamity of flood instead of waiting until it happens. They must act on any negative weather alert. We had experienced the ugly situations before and don't want it again.
This is coming from Mwabwala Babs. Over time, the issue of flooding has been discussed with solutions suggested by various discussants. How far have we gone with regard to those recommendations? Have relevant stakeholders taken steps in addressing or are applying the various mechanisms suggested? I think there is need for an assessment.
Now, from Law Alpha C, People living in flood-prone areas should help themselves by not throwing refuse inside gutters during rainfall in order not to block drainage channels and to cultivate the habit of cleaning their environment regularly.
Chris Simeon tweets, now to avoid its devastating effects, rainwater channels, gutters and drainages should be cleared to allow free flow of water to appropriate locations.
Now, Sani Michael Omakoji, thank you NTA crew for keeping Nigerians abreast. However, we must tell ourselves the bitter truth that some state governors are now taking advantage of the flood by diverting the donations and other funds meant for flooding. May God help Nigeria in no distant time.
Now, this is coming from Melody Yusuf. I congratulate the NTA on its relentless efforts in bringing together key stakeholders with regard to managing floods in the country. We hope that these issues and matters arising will be taken seriously by NEMA and vulnerable states to avoid the devastation of flooding that has now become an annual embarrassment, according to him.
All right. Alhaji Musa Mohammed Hadeja, he says measures have not been taken against the future occurrences in some states. No permanent river embankment was done, and assistance provided by NEMA. NEMA stored and delayed to be distributed to the last year's flood victims, as farmers were indeed in need of farm inputs. Victims still in camp. I'm not sure he put this correctly, but of course he has I've been able to make sense out of this.
Yeah. Okay, Kieran, thanks. I'd like us to go back to Professor Emmanuel Adano in our Kaduna Network Center. We're on the home stretch of this conversation. In terms of appropriate measures, now beginning right from the local level up to, say, the state level, what are those things or those activities that can be embarked upon that do not involve the construction of the big dams, for instance, and over time we will be able, to take care of this? I mean, you find that when state or local governments are talking about projects, nobody talks about desilting rivers or even desilting the environment in a way that would prevent flooding in their locations. What are those quick wins?
Well, the prominent environmentalist with me here, my brother, sir, he mentioned grassing of the environment. Grassing is very important. But when you get to the villages where everybody is an agriculturalist or agrarian in nature, it becomes very difficult for them to start grassing for just protection of silt or the tree roots moving into the valleys. But in a situation where you don't need an environment for anything, it is good just to keep it grassed. This bush burning sometimes is even a problem. You can reduce bush burning in areas that you are not developing for agricultural purposes. Now, if you go to your villages, especially the typical native villages, not these villages that have been created nowadays, most of them are free of flooding because they know how to locate themselves. They know how to put their houses. They know how to manage the environment very, very well. Those who live by the riverside don't live very close to the river. Those are the native, strictly native villages. Now, you can't hand over the problem to them because most of our developments are affecting the villages now. Most activities done are affecting the villages. So villagers are not in any position to solve this problem. But to some extent, if around your compound you have this kind of situation that can warrant flooding, villagers take care of that easily. Now, just for an information, National Water Resources Institute, anytime there's flooding anywhere, we respond immediately, maybe a day after that. The Lokogoma flooding in Abuja, we already have our report. The next day we're there, we have a report ready for FCT. Such reports have been produced and given. And the reasons for this flood, there, stated clearly. Nobody cares about it. I'm repeating it. Nobody cares about it. We give them the report and it remains there. But we are not relenting. Now, National Water Resources Institute organizes conferences every year. The theme for this year's own is the economic values of flooding. initially we're thinking flooding is a problem. So people will be looking at problem. Now let's look at the economic values of flood. This will prompt government to see the information provided, how to manage the flooding, and make it an economic issue. These are things we are doing. And again, dissemination of information. All the universities, all the polytechnics, and stakeholders in water are recipients on our mailing list of all the information we gather from our report. Ask them. We've sent to almost all the polytechnics in the country, all the universities in the country, National Assembly, ministries that have direct contact with, relation with water, stakeholders. We send to them. All we get sometimes is, we are happy we received this acknowledgement, and that's all. Nobody has told us what they intend to do. Even if you don't tell us, let the government know what you intend to do with this report we are providing. We have all this. So to this level, it is difficult for anybody to go to village and tell them what to do from the village level. The states are there to do such things. I can give you an example of one investigation we did, and it was in my state, Benue State. The flooding of, I think last year or year before last, they were blaming the River Benue. River Benue had no direct link at all with that flooding. It was generated from under the ground. And we explained it, and the evidence there. And we told them everything. The report was with us. Nobody wants to use it, but it is there. If you want it in NTA, we can send one copy to you so that you can, with your network, inform them of this. Nobody is ready to use some of these information we provide. All they want is for a response from NEMA. So getting to that level, please let them try to use the information available, information even provided by the villagers to them, and flood risk. The answers are available to even ordinary man. They are available to ordinary man, and they keep telling you this. So I think we need to do more than just reacting to cries. Let's be proactive. Thank you.
All right, let's return to Abuja, where we have a DG of NIMET and, of course, the DG of a hydrological agency. Gentlemen, your predictions over the years have been adjudged accurate, as it were, because most of the predictions, came to pass. But let me ask this question, as I would like you to, from professional point of view, and, of course, your experience, Engineer Nze. Is there a situation, or can there be a situation where some climatic changes can, of course, render or trigger a shift from a prediction? If that is true, how do you manage such? Because what you have predicted. Is there any time you could say, come, we have predicted this, but right now what we are seeing, happening naturally has made this prediction, unrealistic?
Yes, that is true. Predictions are often, influenced, could be altered by the climatic changes. Like Professor Danu mentioned, in 2018, the only state that we didn't predict, or that we said there was no problem, was the first casualty. That is Katsina. Jibia was submerged. That is not only environmental this time around, like if you go to Jibia, or even Abuja also in the same 2018. Human factors, building and blocking the channels, natural drainages that have been tampered by human activities. So, climatic issues have a lot to do in terms of altering the prediction we have made. And that is why we follow it from time. We monitor the development from time to time. We check what I have predicted. And know the issue of how they have. We take record from time to time to see whether the prediction we made is being, whether it's getting fulfilled, whether environmental factors are affecting it the other way around. And I must put it on record that when we predict, it's not really our wish or desire that we will achieve, even if it's 30% prediction accuracy. No. We want people should take measures ahead of time so that the prediction do not actually come to pass. But more often than not, because nothing is done, predictions are keep coming through. In 2013, we achieved 70% accuracy, 70%, which was so high that because people did nothing, they didn't believe it was going to be so. But with the time, some actions being taken by people, there seems to be a little bit of decline, which has stabilized somewhere. That's of accuracy.
Well, for 2019, and considering that we're going to have more rainfall, we're already in July, so we'll get pounded more in August and perhaps part of September. Is it too late to roll back the possible consequences that will flow from your predictions on account of the flooding? And if the consequences are looming, might they also be mitigated in some ways from what you have seen during your visitation to some of the states?
It's like neither here nor there in terms of any kind of form of a preparedness by the states. You went to some states, you really do not see the capacity, the caliber of people you are expecting. After having gone around the states within the catchment to inform them, to come around for you to discuss with them, you eventually, sorry to say it, we are in Benue State on Tuesday. SEMA wasn't there, State SEMA wasn't there. I had to get in touch with the executive secretary of the SEMA in Benue. Are you in this meeting? Where he sent a text that he's outside the country, but we sent somebody. But what I'm saying, there was no single staff of SEMA in Benue at our meeting. So it doesn't seem to be that people are taking measures to avert the consequences of flooding. We already, like Professor Mashi mentioned, we're already getting into it. July, August, September. We're here already in July.
And then invariably we're going to have more victims.
You see, the thing is,
very briefly,
climate is something that is, scientifically speaking, is very easy to predict. With the availability of satellite information now, you can easily monitor the movement of the wind systems. And it is usually the wind systems that are distributing temperature and other climatic conditions over the Earth's surface. So if you can have the capacity, which is now available, to monitor the wind system, it means you can precisely say when precisely are you expecting certain phenomena to occur.
Can we mitigate this now from what you are saying?
Yes, it can be mitigated. It can yes, it can be mitigated. All we need to do is to change the way in which we are doing our carrying out our activities. Our farming, our building, and all that is very, very
well. This issue of mitigation, Kinsley, there are scientific or technological approaches to this. It's not something you wake up one morning and start mitigating. You don't have to put some physical things, in place. Some infrastructure designed for that, sandbagging and what have you. And these are the areas that the states should come in, because they are the people who have the citizens that will be affected when it happens. It's just on what Professor Mashi said. It's on the attitude of Nigeria. And gentlemen, it's been a wonderful time with you on this edition of A Good Morning Nigeria. We've actually tackled some of the issues raised in this conversation. And at this point, we'd like to appreciate all of you for being here this morning. First, Engineer Clement Eze, Director General of the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Professor Sani Abubakar Mashi, Director General, NIMET, and Nigeria's permanent representative, the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. We also appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Right. We don't get to see you quite often, but I'm sure you will be obliging us.
Thank you very much.
All right. And Dr. Yahya Ibrahim, an Associate Professor of Environmental Health and Safety Management, and also Director, Center for Energy and Environmental Strategy Research, Kaduna State University. Thank you indeed for sharing your thoughts and your experience on this program. Thank you. And a regular face, Professor Emmanuel Adanu. Professor Adanu is the Executive Director, National Water Resources Institute, Kaduna. Professor Adanu, thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. All right, the next is sports.